Welcome to the Dr. Broadway Podcast, the musical theater history podcast where a couple of doctors sit around and talk about Broadway. I'm your co-host, Dr. Kristin Stultz Pressley, joined as always by Dr. Tracey Brent-Chessum. Tracey, this is a special one. I know this one's going to be near and dear to both of our hearts.
Our hearts.
So tell the people.
I'm feeling like we may be back at an Annie moment.
I know. I was thinking of Annie this morning too.
Can I just say, Annie's still our longest episode to date. So this is...
This and is deservedly
the
so.
Ones that we grew up with and loved. So this is episode 5 of Bookish, this micromester, and when we're talking about touring musicals that are based on books. And today we look at the last collaboration of Rodgers and Hammerstein, The Sound of Music, which premieres on Broadway in 1959 and becomes a major hit movie, obviously, in 1965. Think about that now. You can get just as many people to go see Sound of Music today on film as you could then. So it is, it's a hot commodity when it comes to. It's very, very beloved, which is interesting if you think about it because it is, completely based in Europe.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not
That's
an
true.
American story.
That's very true.
But it captures the heart of the world. So,
well, and it tackles themes that the world could certainly relate to. Given that there's World War II and
enough time. It's like 1959. We're just over 10 years, 10, 12 years after World War II. People are starting to process. And I think that's another, we talk about it takes 20 years
that's
for
right.
you to process war and everything. And that 10-year spot ends up being the time where you actually are like, okay, maybe I can deal with this now.
Yeah.
And looking, actually being able to hear and, process those stories of people who've immigrated to the United States from Europe during, after World War II, and being able to kind of wrap your brain around what it was really like there, and our experience versus European experiences. That kind of stuff is just starting to be reckoned with. So it's a good moment.
The show was 59, but the film was 65, and VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, was May 8th, 1945. So that's right exactly at 20 days. Or maybe,
20 years.
Yeah, 20 years.
20 days.
Sorry. It's too early. Right at 20 years. And of course, it remains to this day one of the best-selling movies of all time when adjusted for inflation. So there is something about it. You're so right. It is, when people ask me my gateway drugs into musical theater, it is always Annie and The Sound of Music. Always, 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 always. And in fact,
but I think most scholars our age would say that.
Of course, absolutely.
Not just you. You are very right.
Well, and it our age is key, because our age, we were very little when video cassette recorders were introduced into the American home. And so we could go and rent these, or if you had crafty parents, you could perhaps bootleg them. And certainly we had bootleg copies of both, and I watched them all the time. So that accessibility, that's what made it my gateway drug, was accessibility. And then it resonated, something about it resonated with us that in ways that other things did not, right? Yeah. And it just kept coming back for more and more and more.
Because I didn't see a lot of live theater when I was growing up.
No, same.
It just wasn't available. So it wasn't like there were community theater performances of The Sound of Music happening on every other corner, like it feels like there is now.
That's right.
But we did. We had videotapes. We had the
That's
VHS.
exactly right. That's exactly right.
And if you backed the wrong horse, you had beta.
Yes, we never had a beta. We went straight to VCR.
We did too.
But my uncle's family had a beta, so I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. Now, of course, this one is a special emotional. We have a special emotional attachment to this in the same way that we did Annie. But Tracey has some particular research interest involved, particularly in the life of Oscar Hammerstein. She's talked about her love of Ock, as she calls him, as he was called by many. Before, but Tracey, I wonder if you can tell us about your research interests as it pertains to Mr. Hammerstein.
Well, I mean, obviously, I spent a lot of time. In 2019, I spent the better part of 4 months going back and forth from Pittsburgh to D.C., like every weekend, sitting in the Library of Congress's music division and pulling every single, box on Oscar Hammerstein. And so I have thousands of pictures that, last night I'm desperately rifling through trying to find the best ones to talk about today. But I've got thousands and thousands of pictures of stuff that he, that was found in his office and things that we've seen. He actually did a very, very good job of archiving for us. We still have all of his lyric sheets, like where he's starting to kind of work things out, but also all of the telegrams and all of the, correspondence. And because they were in the day and age that they were, and they didn't have, today we have computers and we can save a copy of what we send to people, or we can recover that copy. They would use kind of those, it's not microfiche, but kind of templating paper. So they had a copy of what they sent too. So we have the copy of what he sent next to the response and things like that. And they did, an excellent job of archiving. I think that is thanks to his eldest daughter, actually.
Oh, how about that? Okay.
She served as kind of his right-hand man for a long time.
And point of information just about that, we've talked about this before. Mark Eden Horowitz published or edited a massive collection of Hammerstein's letters that was published, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. It's relatively recent. It's massive. If you see this big, thick, if you're watching on YouTube, this one right here, the biggest and the fattest, that's Hammerstein's letters. And Mark Eden so they're available.
Yeah, Mark Eden Horowitz is actually the librarian of the music division, and he's a wonderful guy. They figured out what I was doing. He came and talked to me. I've talked to him several times about looking for certain things. And so, at first I didn't really know. I wasn't going there looking for something. I was looking kind of at a life, and it was one of the most kind of amazing times I've had, if you can say that in an archive. Me sitting by myself. I know, but. Like someone that you don't know who's obviously passed on, but I'm sitting there reading all of his letters and in order, and you get really a good sense of who that person is.
Oh, no question.
And you start understanding kind of what makes them tick. And, I'm sure that there's no way to really know someone from what they leave behind, but you can get a good sense, I think. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like I have a good sense of Ock and have so much more respect for him now than I did when I started this whole this entire journey that I've been on, because I think some people look at him and say, oh, he's Oscar Hammerstein II, and if you know anything about his life, it's like, oh, he was a Nepo baby, that kind of thing. And I'm like, yes and no. Right. Yes, his grandfather was the great impresario of Broadway, but he had to work his way up, and writing was not something that Oscar I did, and he learned that all on his own. But the great thing about Ock is just his desire to give back. At all times, you just kind of see over and over and over again him giving advice to younger writers, him helping friends, stepping in, standing in the gap for people. And you see that, I think, most clearly when he's dealing with, a flood of letters that he's getting from Europe in the 1930s from Germany, where Ock I was from and immigrated from, and they need to get out of the country because of the rising Nazi regime, and him trying to figure out what's my policy on helping people and how do I help people get out of this, because obviously there's something going on here that we need to help them with. But kind of watching him deal with that, because I'm not sure how I would deal with it if I was getting letters every day saying, we are family, we're second cousins, we're third cousins, you're a name, and I need to get myself into Britain, or I need to get myself into the United States, and I need someone to sponsor me, or could you help me get a job? I've gotten myself here. Could you help me get a job? And kind of watching him try. Right. He doesn't succeed every single time, but he tries, and how much that seems to weigh on him. And it's something that kind of follows, I think, his trajectory. And I read his shows very differently now than I did beforehand. And I tend to read all of his shows through that lens of nostalgia, yes, but for kind of the America he grew up in, but also through the lens of, a man who knows what horrors can happen when there is no checks and balances, and hoping that we learn from the past, and that we never get ourselves into that situation again. I think, World War II weighs much heavier on him, even though he doesn't fight in it. It weighs much heavier on him than you would know just, listening to Oklahoma. So...
Well, and you also have to imagine that those letters that you're aware of from his family members in Europe had to impact the way that he approached the story for The Sound of Music. Because, in fact, the story that we know as The Sound of Music is pretty drastically different from the story that Maria herself knew as The Sound of Music, right?
Exactly. And then it's like you have this... The other thing about The Sound of Music that, we'll talk about in a little bit is that Ock is very sick when they're writing.
That's right.
He's got the beginnings of stomach cancer, and he ends up passing away in 1960, so 6 months after the show opens. But he's not even able to come to New Haven for the out-of-town tryout. He's in the hospital, and he is absolutely... Okay, my brain just farted, and I have no idea what I was saying. What was I talking about? Hold on.
You were talking about he's in the hospital. He couldn't go to the tryout in New Haven. What was your question? Oh, I was saying how the letters from his family members in Europe had to have impacted the way that he approached.
Okay, so I know what I was going to say now. See,
go
I
for
get
it.
going on things. But because he's sick in the hospital, he doesn't write the book for The Sound of Music.
Lindsay Krause does.
He has always written the book. He is the master book writer. The idea that the man would not write the book for this was like, wait, excuse me, who did that?
Right.
But it's what's interesting to me that still so much of Hammerstein's footprints, Ock's fingerprints are all over this. And some of it is just in the way of, this is how we're writing it. Here's the structure of the show. Yes, you can write all the dialogue, but here's my structure. So that he's not having to do the writing of the dialogue, but he is giving people a structure to work within. There's actual stuff on legal pads that I have pictures of where he's like, this is what's going to happen here. This is our opening. This is here. We're going to need an ingenue song right here, which ends up being 16 going on 17. And then we're going to need this, and then we're going to need this, and this is the structure of it, and this is what happens here. So that, Lindsay Krause and, what's the other guy's name? Remind me. Do you remember off the top of your head? I'm now looking at our notes.
All I can think of is Robert Wise, who directed the film.
Hold on. Howard Lindsay and Russell Krause. That's what we were trying
Lindsay and Krause.
Excited historian.
That's right. I knew it was Lindsay and Krause.
I was like, wait a minute. So Ock's fingerprints are all over it, even though he doesn't write it. But, still, the lens is you can tell is all Ock, because it is about, the show is about, mourning your homeland. And I will talk more about Edelweiss here in a bit, but it is kind of looking at looking at the past nostalgia and saying, this is not what my home is anymore, and bless it, but I need to get out of here, which is, and we're going to go climb every mountain over the Alps, which is not what happened in the actual story. They got on a train, and nobody even, with no one was chasing them, no problems. Yes. But, he's kind of amalgamating the story there. So it's kind of fun. But I mean, I love Ak. Actually, one of the great things that I get to do is I'm writing the Hammerstein episode of the Essential Series. Wait
a minute. Let's take a moment for that. Say it again, Tracey. You're writing what?
I'm writing what? So I'm writing a book on Hammerstein's musicals. Obviously, not all of them. But kind of a hand-picked few that kind of shows his development as a writer. That's going to be part of the Essential Series, which Kristin helms as the editor. And she just published 2 about Pulitzer Prize winners. And
Jukebox musicals.
And Jukebox musicals. I was like, the ones that we talk about all the time here. And then there's another one in the series about... Queer musicals. And so
just came out.
This is kind of like the second iteration of that. So I'm going to write the I keep calling them the episodes on, just because that's how my brain works at the moment. But I'm writing the book on Hammerstein. We're going to leave Rogers for someone else to do, so that Rogers and Hart can be covered as well.
Right. I think a lot of people will kind of raise their eyebrows when they see that there's not a Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals edition. But the more that we thought about it, the more that it made sense to split them apart. I know you and I discussed it because it allows for, you're right, the Rodgers and Hart material, but also Rodgers wrote with Sondheim. Rodgers wrote with, there were other Rodgers collaborations.
And Hammerstein wrote
and Hammerstein as well.
Tons of people into the, starting as early as the
That's right.
the teens.
Most notably Jerome Kern.
Yeah, and so you can't include that if you do a Rodgers and Hammerstein. And
exactly.
So we kind of split the Rodgers and Hammersteins up so that Mr. Rogers can have some of them.
And the important thing there is that we want with the series to have as broad a foundation for studying as many musicals as possible. And what we can do by looking at Rodgers and Hart and then comparing that to Rodgers and Hammerstein is that it really accentuates what Rodgers and Hammerstein did that was so groundbreaking.
Yeah.
Right? But it at the same time allows us to remember what Rodgers and Hart did, and they were part of that milieu of the Gershwin brothers and Cole Porter and so many of those great writers of the, the kind of musical comedy era of the 20s and 30s that is beloved by many too, and is very much a part of the great American musical theater canon. Mm-hmm. So we want to be sure that we can include as many things as possible. And that opened the door to enable that by splitting up Rodgers and Hammerstein. But we are thrilled to have Tracey, given her breadth of knowledge about Oscar Hammerstein.
All of my pictures.
All of her pictures. And that was another thing I wanted to say. When she says pictures, I can see this so clearly. When you are a researcher, you're not allowed to make copies of stuff. But you can. Yes, I recognize those. I have many of those from that same library. But you are allowed to take pictures. And so I have giant, just like Tracey alluded to on my camera roll, there's whole sections of scripts that I've photographed or legal pad pages where Dorothy Fields is, scribbling, rhyming patterns and all that
that's
stuff.
What you get with Hammerstein's as well. The thing is that we can attest to the fact that you're basically looking at how they wrote a musical on paper. And it actually tells you so much about kind of what ways they went on and what ways they didn't, and when they turned the corner and when they got rid of this song or whatever it was. And so it's a fun little treasure hunt, and the stuff that you get to hold is mighty fun if you have a brain like mine. But,
yes, same. Awe-inspiring. And you just sit there and think, for me, of course, it was Dorothy Fields. But and most of my work on her was done in Lincoln Center in New York City at the Theater for the Performing Arts Library.
Yeah.
but you sit there and you hold something and you're wearing white gloves usually, and you're just astounded by, you are literally touching history. You are reaching 50, 60, 70, 80 years back into the archive, and it's unbelievable. Yeah. So at any rate, we are thrilled that Tracey is going to tell us more about what she's learned about Hammerstein, and cannot wait for this book to be released in the series. I think probably it'll be released, I don't know the exact dates, but I would imagine 2027. Does that sound right? So it won't be long. It won't be long. And then you can learn all that Tracey has about Oscar Hammerstein. So congratulations, Tracey.
I'm excited. I'm excited to actually be able to kind of put all of this knowledge and distill it down into something that can make people fall in love with Hawk as well. Because, you know, he should be he should. The grandfather of the nation, I believe. He absolutely should. I have a lot of good feelings for this man.
Yeah, same. That's awesome. Well, on that note, let's get started talking about The Sound of Music, which, as you mentioned, was Oscar Hammerstein's final musical, not Richard Rodgers' final musical. However, we won't go into that. But except to quickly say, after Hammerstein died, he did find other collaborators, including Stephen Sondheim, who was Hammerstein's protege.
And the stuff about that in the archive is crazy, y'all.
Sure.
You gotta go.
I'm sure.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna read your book. I'll just let you do all the heavy lifting, and I'll read it.
Okay.
So let's now talk about The Sound of Music. This musical that is so meaningful not only to us but to so many people. This show premiered on Broadway in 1959. At the Lunt-Fontanne Theater. It won 7 Tony Awards, including Best Musical. But let me tell you something really interesting about this show. It's the one and only time that the Best Musical Tony Award was split 2 ways. And it was given to Fiorello. Random. I know. I knew I'd get that response, because that's how I felt too when I found that out. It was given to Fiorello and The Sound of Music. Fiorello also won the Pulitzer Prize for Drama. Which is also it makes
me go, like that doesn't, but in that particular moment, Fiorello was much more, I think, culturally relevant. Whereas
if you don't know,
the sound of music is a nostalgia baby that we are gonna continue. That's gonna continue on forever, right? It's not like this is arrived at the right moment. It's exposed corruption. It's done this. It's done all of that kind of stuff. And you know, this is a different. Sound of Music is a different kind of show.
Yeah, Fiorello, if you don't know, was about the mayor of New York. Fiorello LaGuardia, who, of course, the airport is named after, but he was New York's little flower, and he was a diminutive man who wielded great power and was beloved. He wasn't a tyrant, I don't mean that, but he was beloved. People loved him. And so this musical about his life by Harnick and Bach wins the Pulitzer Prize and shares the Tony Award, which I think is fascinating. It's never happened again.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting. And then it ran for 1,443 performances. So we're beginning to see some long runs. That really starts with Oklahoma, that we start to see exorbitantly long runs. Now, still nothing, 1,443 performances today drop in the bucket, right? And we talked about Phantom of the Opera last week, which was 13,800 plus performances. So this is a drop in the bucket, but for the time, very, very healthy run. And then the 1965 film, which was so formative for so many of us, was the number 2 highest grossing American film, or is the second highest grossing American film of all time when adjusted for inflation. So it's really unbelievable. But let me say this, and I don't want to be the one to break this to you, but I guess I will, because that's my job today. The story that we know and love of The Sound of Music is not necessarily in all ways exactly the story of the Trapp family.
It's an invention.
It's an invention. But I think when you understand, like we just alluded to, when you understand the interactions that Hammerstein had been having with people in Europe during the war, I think it helps you to understand why he reframed the telling of this story. Not only did it up the dramatic value, but he had something to say. And we know that Oscar Hammerstein did like to say things in his musicals, right? Look at South Pacific, for instance. Look at Oklahoma, right? Yeah. I mean, he wanted to say things.
And we, I don't know much about Lindsay and Krause. I don't.
I don't either.
Because they end up being kind of like the minor players.
I gave them one name.
Yeah, I mean, they end up being kind of the minor players in all of this. But, they either were, just were like, this is the man who knows musicals. We're gonna follow, because they were actually hired and contracted to write a stage play, and then it became a musical. And they're like, we don't know how to write musicals. What are you talking about? So, there's. We don't know how much of it, was them as well, and I don't want to downplay their.
Sure. Of course.
Their contribution in any way, but it's got Hammerstein's fingerprints all over it. So
yeah. So let me tell you the real story of Maria Kuchera.
Maria Rayner.
That's right.
They changed her last name. There's like something in the archive where they're like, this last, it's just no, let's just change it. Let's make it Rayner.
Yeah, like why? Like
it was like no.
Yeah. So Maria Kuchera was born in Vienna, Austria in 1905. She was orphaned by the time she was 7 years old. So the fact that she would later end up mothering orphaned children was something that actually she could relate to pretty deeply. She graduated from the Vienna Teachers College at the age of 18, which will become important in just a few minutes. And after she graduated, just a few years after she graduated, she joins Naumburg Abbey. So that is an actual thing in an actual place in Salzburg, Austria. That was in 1924 when she joins. And 2 years later, a man named Georg von Trapp visits the Abbey in 1926. Now, let me tell you a little bit about him. He, as you see represented in the show and in the film, was an Austrian U-boat commander, and he was highly decorated. He had sunk over 30 enemy ships during World War I, and then had married Agatha Whitehead. Agatha Whitehead was a very wealthy woman. Her grandfather had invented the torpedo. So they really lived off of her inherited wealth. And once Austria lost its seaports, as you know, Europe is kind of reconfiguring itself in that time. Once Austria lost its seaports, von Trapp retires from the Navy. He doesn't need to work. His wife's grandfather invented the torpedo. They have lots and lots of money, especially given that it was wartime and torpedoes were at a premium, right? So they live on her inherited wealth. But unfortunately, in 2022, just a couple years after the end of World War I,
hold on.
Oh, what happened? Did it get something?
1922.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
2022.
1922.
She was very old.
That's a totally different story, right? Thank you for catching my mistake.
Sorry.
No, I'm glad you did, because I would have listened later and been like, dadgummit. How did I say that? 1922, thank you. She passes away from scarlet fever. And when she does, she leaves behind 7 children, as we all know. So Georg moves his 7 children to Salzburg. And at one point in 1926, his daughter also, I don't know which daughter, has scarlet fever. And as a result, she couldn't walk to school. She was too sick to go to school. So he needed a tutor. So what does he do but visit Naumburg Abbey in 1926 and asks for a tutor? Well, which one of the nuns at Naumburg Abbey had graduated from Teachers College? That was Maria Kuchera. So it made the most sense that Maria should go to be the tutor for this child and eventually the 6 other children as well. So she goes, she's endearing and wonderful and every bit as lovable as Julie Andrews portrays her to be on the film, and Mary Martin portrayed her to be on stage in the original Broadway production. And seeing her love for his children, Georg proposes to Maria in 1927, and she accepts. And they get married, and they have 3 more children together. And, they continue living on Agatha Whitehead's wealth. All of it was kept in a bank in London, so it was nice and safe and tidy and dry, and they had all that they ever needed and lived a very nice lifestyle, right? Thanks to Agatha's grandfather.
So just so you know, the reason why they would put money in, why he would put money in a London bank is because the terms of peace after World War I did not let kind of Germany and also those kinds of they were not allowed to kind of accumulate wealth, so it wasn't a safe place to keep anything.
I didn't know that.
So yeah, I mean, you understand that, you start understanding real quickly that this is not just a military man. This is a man who has a lot of money and a lot of friends. So he has enough money that people are taking care of his wealth and not allowing him to not necessarily squander it, but they're just not letting it fall into the wrong hands.
They're protecting it. I did not know that. That's interesting. Okay, cool. So it's in London, but for whatever reason, he decides he's going to pull it. I think he had a friend who was, I don't understand. Yeah. Obviously, this is way above my pay grade, but the money gets moved to Austria.
Because Austrian banks were losing their liquidity. And, he's about rebuilding Austria, so he's trying to help. He's like, okay, if I bring my money there, that'll give you the liquidity to keep moving. But what happens?
But unfortunately, the Austrian banks failed.
Yeah. And when the Austrian, all of his money.
And the torpedo money is gone. Is sunk. Yeah, it is
sunk. Is sunk. Yes. How long have you been sitting on that one?
It just came to me. It just came to me. So the money is gone. And so suddenly they have to get creative. It's the mid-1930s. And so they have to get creative in how they're going to support themselves. Not only is it Maria and Georg, but they've got now 10 children between them. And they've got to figure out how they're going to support each other. And so what they do is they let go of all of their staff. They had a pretty significant staff to run this beautiful villa that they owned. And they let go of them all, and they live on the top floor. And the rest of the villa is occupied by students from a nearby Catholic university. And when the leaders at the Catholic university see that all of these students are living there, they think, well, we need to send a chaplain over in order to be there for the students, to kind of keep tabs on them, to, serve as spiritual counsel, whatever it might be. And so an archbishop sends over Father Franz Vossner, and Father Vossner is the chaplain for these Catholic students. Now, so they're all living downstairs in the villa. Upstairs is the Von Trapp family, and then the family is supporting itself based on the rental income from these students. So in 1936, an opera singer named Lottie Lehman comes to the villa, and she's asking about a room. And when she gets there, she hears this family in the garden singing. Now, the Von Trapp family had always sung. They had sung when Agatha was alive. They had continued to sing. And then when Maria came, she had taught them how to sing, taught the children how to sing madrigals. Well, we see that in the film, right? Or we see that in the show as well. So she hears this happening in the garden. Lottie Lehman hears it happening in the garden, and she says, oh my gosh, y'all are unbelievable. You've got gold in your throats, and you need to participate in the Salzburg Festival. And guess what? It's tomorrow night. So she's like, boy, did I come at the right time, Georg, of course, says, absolutely not. And we see this in the show as well. My family will not be caught dead doing that. Absolutely not. But Lehman persists, and eventually, and it didn't take too long because the festival was the next day, Von Trapp gives in and the family is allowed to participate. And what do you know? Lottie Lehman was right. They did have gold in their throats. They won the festival as the Trapp Family Choir. And then they realized, wait a minute, we could support ourselves as a touring musical act. What if we did that? Since we've, Agatha's money is gone, what if we support ourselves by traveling as the Trapp Family Choir or the Trapp Family Singers? And Father Wosner, remember that chaplain who had been sent over by the Archbishop in Salzburg to be a spiritual advisor for the Catholic students living at the villa, Father Wosner goes along as their musical director. So in 1938, by 1938, just a few, not long after they had won the festival, the political climate of Europe has shifted such that the Von Trapp family realizes they need to expatriate to the U.S. So they leave the country. It is not, as Tracey has already said, it was not under cloak of darkness. Mm-mm. It was not while being chased by Nazis. There was no nun who took the starter out of the car. Out of the car.
My favorite part.
Isn't that so wonderful?
Reverend Mother, I have sinned.
There was none of that. Without much fanfare, they leave the country. And by 1938, they've settled in Stowe, Vermont. Let me tell you, the Von Trapp family is still in Stowe, Vermont. They operate the Trapp Family Lodge, and it's a beautiful spot. My family we didn't stay there, but we went and had lunch there and toured, just looked at the grounds. I couldn't be in Vermont and not go see it. Had to be in the presence of the Von Trapps, as close as I could get to them anyway. So they still have this lodge in Stowe, Vermont. You can go see it. It's beautiful. And then when they weren't touring the U.S. and Canada as the Trapp Family Singers, they would have music camps at the lodge, which they operate. And still to this day, the family operates in Stowe, Vermont. About 10 years later, not quite 10 years later, I guess, in 1947, Georg dies of lung cancer, but the family continues doing these camps, continues traveling the country and Canada as well. And a couple years after Georg dies, a friend of the family's pleads with Maria to write down this story, right? Like, you've got to tell this story. It's unbelievable. Maria... that is not what I do. I am not a writer. I am a singer. I am a mother. I am not a writer. But this friend, again, persisted, just like Lottie Lehman had. She kept badgering Maria. And so finally, to get this friend to leave her alone, she spent about an hour in her room one night writing what she could. She hands it over to her friend. Her friend shows it to a publisher. And the publishers are like, this is unbelievable. You have to finish it, and we have to publish it. And so, in fact, that is what happened. The story of the Trapp Family Singers was published in 1949 and is an instant bestseller. Let me say this about this book. I bought a copy at the Trapp Family Lodge in Stowe, Vermont. And if you think Maria, the character, portrayed iconically on stage by Mary Martin and iconically on film by Julie Andrews, if you think that character is lovable and adorable and endearing and all of those things, read this book, because she is the most likable, positive, just reading this book, you're like, I want to be just like her. I mean, just joie de vivre. There's a French word I don't know how to pronounce, but just joy of living. She just had so much joy of living. And in spite of really some hard times that her family had been through, her attitude was so positive and so uplifting. And she tells this story. And it's just it's so beautifully done. It's a real quick and easy read. I highly encourage you to get it and read it. It's great. And I'm not the only one who felt that way. It was an instant bestseller when it was published in 1949. And in fact, it was adapted into a couple of German films in the mid-1950s. There was The Trapp Family in 1956, and then The Trapp Family in America in 1958. Now, Mary Martin we got to talk about Mary Martin here for a minute. Mary Martin was a Broadway mainstay. In fact, she had been part of, let's connect her to Rodgers and Hammerstein with South Pacific. She was Nellie Forbush in the original Broadway production of South Pacific in 1949. She was known and beloved on Broadway before that. She'd actually toured in the touring production as Annie Oakley in Annie Get Your Gun. So, and
She was also the original Peter Pan.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And that one was the one that they put on film for TV. And
that's right.
So she was well known.
She was very well known.
Her son, did you know this? Larry Hagman.
I did.
From Dallas, which I was not allowed to watch.
I wasn't either.
But
fun fact about Dallas.
Fun fact.
Yeah, he was J.R. Ewing, her son. And my name, Kristin, comes from the show Dallas.
Are you serious?
Because, yeah, my dad saw it.
Crack me up. They just.
Yes, my dad.
Love it.
Yeah, my dad saw the name Kristin on the credits of this TV show.
You're like, this is a great name.
That's the one. That's the one. So, that's the one. Anyway, I digress. And I may be wrong about the TV. I think now that I'm wrong. They saw it on another TV show that was predated, because I'm older than Dallas, I think, but predated Dallas. And then when I was about 3 years old was when Kristin shot JR on Dallas. And then I would sit and yell at the TV, Kristin shot JR. And I would say, on the show, not me. I didn't shoot JR. So I think that's the Dallas connection. But there definitely is one. But Kristin came from the credits of a TV show. And then Kristin shot JR, but it was not me. It was on the show.
I got it.
We digress. How could we bring Delaney Benson into this conversation?
Exactly.
What does Delaney Benson think of Dallas, I wonder?
I don't know.
At any rate, so there's these two films. Mary Martin sees the films, and her husband and manager, Richard Halliday, they decide that they want to adapt them into stage plays for Mary Martin. And while I don't know this, I bet this is the place where Lindsay and Krause were brought in to write these stage plays.
It is exactly when they were.
Okay, perfect. I didn't know that little, as you were talking about that, I was like, I bet that's where they come in right here. What I do know about that stage play that they were looking to produce for as a vehicle for Mary Martin was that Mary Martin asked her buddies from from South Pacific rather, who had also produced Annie Get Your Gun, which she had led the tour in. She asked them if they would write an Austrian style folk song that Mary Martin could sing as part of the play. So it was not that she was saying, will you turn this into a musical? She had all the pieces in place and wanted them to write one song for it, just an Austrian folk song. And what they said, they were working at the time on Flower Drum Song, and they said, actually, if you'll give us a minute, once we're done with Flower Drum Song, we'll make this into a musical. And she said, I guess I can wait for that, right? And this is at this point, by the time it premiered on Broadway, 10 full years. We are a decade removed from South Pacific. And both of them, both Mary Martin and Rodgers and Hammerstein had enormous success through the 50s, independent of each other. But they reunite a decade after the success of South Pacific. And like I said earlier, the show opens in 1959, and you're going to fill in some of the gaps about the development, but that's I think the most interesting piece for me is how different the real life story is from the story that we all assumed was true about the Von Trapps.
The other thing I want to point out is that this one takes a lot more money to produce than all the rest of them.
Interesting.
$480,000 to produce, and
I'm pulling up my calculator now.
Yeah, you should, because that's a pretty sizable number that we haven't seen from the Golden Age at this point.
Yes,
especially when you consider this is not like a high tech kind of like special effects musical. That's
what I'm thinking. What did they spend it on?
Yeah, what did they spend it on, and this, that, and the other thing? I mean, part of it, I think, was the fact that now we have 4 writers other than 2.
That's fair. Yep.
But I do think that if you look at the archive, there's not a lot of correspondence between Lindsay and Krause and Rodgers and Hammerstein. Everything seems to be funneled through Halliday, Mary Martin's husband, Richard Halliday, who's going to be one of the producers. And so he ends up being kind of the conduit. And they are, I think that, that could be part of the issues. We have lots more cooks in the kitchen all of a sudden. But, that's a sizable sum of money.
Well, and to put it in numbers we can understand, $480,000 in 1959 would be the equivalent of $5.3 million today.
Yeah. Which is still
not anything
for us, but
right. But it's interesting that you point that out, because the first time, and I'm sure there are other places, I just haven't seen it yet, but the first time that I saw producers sounding the alarm about the cost of producing a Broadway show was like 1960-61, when I was researching about Fiorello and how to succeed in business without really trying. Yeah. So that would put it right around this same time that prices, that costs begin to escalate.
Yeah. There was a news clipping that I have. And if I go find it, I'm going to lose my place in my archival notes, and I'm not going to go do that, but I'll just tell you what it said. I'm not going to check too much of it. But when Paramount buys the rights to the musical to put on film, there's this big deal about the fact that they can finally pay back the original capital. Like, the investors can finally be paid back. They got a $1.25 million contract to. So
that was the advance.
That's the advance. Those are the rights for that movie musical. That is huge.
I'll tell you how
they had not paid back all of the investors. They had only gotten to about 450, so they still were working on that last 30,000. So
wow. And just to give you a little bit of a counterpoint to that, hang on, I'm looking up 1.25 million. Let's look at this. It'd be the equivalent of 12.9 million today. South Pacific, they handed out their first checks on opening night. So 10 years removed. Oscar Hammerstein is handing out checks to investors opening night with South Pacific. And then they still, 4 years down the road with a hit like Sound of Music, had not paid off their investment. That's crazy.
Yeah.
But it also, Tracy, that also makes me think of the conversation we had about Cabaret, about, this recent production, and how, like, it seems by all accounts like this should be pretty easy to pay off. Why are you not paying it off? And probably a lot of the same, I don't know, but it's interesting that the conversation could have been had 50 years ago, 60 years ago.
So, obviously no one's hurting. This show is going to make money forever, and it does, and it continues to make money forever. They're putting it back on tour. It's fine. We're going to be fine. Bingo. But it took a little bit of time, which is a little bit unusual for some of their musicals. So I always like to kind of point that out when I find it, because I was like, that's interesting. Because Rodgers and Hammerstein are famous for putting together, like with Oklahoma, this. It's not foolproof, but at least how do we finance a musical, and how do we pay it back, and how do we make sure people don't lose money, and blah 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 blah. Right. And capitalizing a musical, they're really good at that. That's one of the things that they gift to us. But this one just took quite a bit of time, and it's all over the news. They're like that finally pays back its investment, and I was like, interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to look into that, because that would, I just am, for one thing, my mind is not a business mind, which is why I have to use a calculator to help me understand, what money then means as money now, because I cannot think if it's not concrete for me. But I do think the economics of Broadway are just so interesting. And what's even more interesting is that we see here, I say 50 years ago, but it's more like 60, almost 70 years ago, an example of a show that we would never assume would be part of that, taking a while to recoup. It's just shocking to me.
Again, sometimes we have to separate what it does at at his debut with what's happening later. We all know and love the musical. We're introduced to it in a completely different way. The stage musical is very different than the film.
Very different.
Very different than the film. And works much better in the film than it does necessarily on, as far as the writing is concerned. It's a little clunky, the show. And it wasn't perfectly well received either. You look at the opening night reviews, and it's like, this is a little sappy. This is a little too much like, oh yeah, climb every mountain, isn't this easy?
Yeah.
Like, lots and lots of reviews talk about it. It's like, it's over-dominated with children. That was my favorite one.
Yes.
This is over-dominated with children. Like, this is not a real musical. And a lot of them are like, the music and lyrics, you can see Rodgers and Hammerstein are kind of at the height of their framework, but this is just fluff. Not well received. It's not perfectly well received. But then if you think about it in the terms of kind of the cultural zeitgeist, this is a musical that everybody in the family can watch and see themselves. And that hasn't really happened. I mean, you could look at Annie Get Your Gun, but it's not put on film right away. And there's not a lot of kids on stage necessarily that American kids are going to see themselves in.
And even, yes, you're absolutely right. And even, I was thinking when you said they were talking about how it was overrun with kids, I was trying to think of another show that would have had a bunch of kids. But even like you said, Peter Pan, Mary Martin, yeah, exactly. They had adult actors, and they still often cast that show with adult performers. Even like Wendy and, everybody John and Michael, it's adults.
But then, I mean, there are tons of kids in The King and I.
That's true.
But we're not. True. But it's not like we're. This is again. You have to kind of think about it. It's not that we're seeing kids and kids are seeing themselves in here. And in that time in our country, American kids are not seeing themselves on the stage, and so it doesn't. It doesn't have the same effect. But I really, really think that a good portion of the reason Sound of Music goes so well is because it's not just for adults going to the theater anymore. This is something that you can watch with a bowl of popcorn from your favorite popcorn / throw-up bowl that everybody has.
Right.
And we can all do this together. And that is how it worked. But that is meant that its longevity is probably more attributed to that aspect than it is to its construction. I wouldn't say that this is their best work. Most people would probably do that because this is the one that they know of. But as far as like construction is concerned, there is a little bit that is, it tends to get a little sappy in there. And I think that part of that is because we're team writing literally for the first time in 20 years. We're writing with a team. But, and it took them some time to kind of figure out what was necessary. But I think the greatest testament to kind of the writing team itself, is just that all of that criticism goes away in 1965 when we get to the film. And part of it is the addition of new songs. I Have Confidence in Sunshine, written completely by Richard Rodgers. Hammerstein
lyrics too.
Yeah, Hammerstein was dead at that point, so he writes that, and he writes Something Good. Perhaps I had a wicked childhood. Perhaps I had a miserable youth, right? It gets rid of some of the political, the movie gets rid of some of the political commentary in it. Max Detweiler and Elsa Schrader, the Baroness, play really pretty minor parts in the film. And it really is more focused on this love story, isn't it? And the love story is centered, yes, in the stage play, but there's a lot more commentary about what's happening out in the big wide world than there is in the film. The original musical has several songs that Max and Baroness Elsa sing together basically. Yeah. In the film, Elsa, or the Baroness, leaves because she realizes that he is in love with Maria, and that is not why she leaves in the show. She leaves in the show because Georg cannot say that he will not engage against injustice. There's an entire song that's called "There's No Way to Stop It." No, there's no way to stop it, that they sing. And, it is all about the coming Anschluss, where the Nazis are going to come and take over Austria. And both of these characters are singing an entire song, which I love. It's one of my favorite songs ever. But the chorus is, "And there's no way to stop it. No, there's no way to stop it. No, you can't stop it, even if you try. So I'm not going to worry. No, I'm not going to worry every time I see another day go by." And it's all about this idea, like, you're a fool if you worry. Yes, you're a fool if you worry over anything but little number one. So it's about I, nothing quite as marvelous as I. And showing kind of their difference of perspective with Georg. And this idea that it's like, look, I am one person. I don't like what is happening. I think it's wrong, but I can't stop it. Right. So in the meantime, I'm going to take care of me.
And they're also, those two characters are also made to look like they're just kind of frivolous. Like I love the song "How Can Love Survive?" Yes. Which they also sing, but it's about, we've got all this money and this big house. How can love survive? If we don't have to scrimp and save, and how can love survive?
But this is where you see Hammerstein's fingerprints, where it's like we have the principled couple that's right. Are not living the high life. That's right. That are doing, that stick to their principles, even when it means we're going to have to do something very scary and difficult, like climb a mountain and get our family out of there, having to leave everything behind in that. But the principled family kind of gets where they're going, and Max and Elsa really do kind of provide that counterbalance of basically what a good portion of Europe and America does in crisis.
Laissez-faire,
We all do this. It's like, I can't fix this problem out in front of me. I am one person. So I got to take care of us. I got to take care of my family. I got to take care of me. That needs to be my number one priority while, Rome burns. Mm-hmm. This is what we do. And he has a pretty... I get the point pretty clearly, you know. I'm like, I got it, Ock. Like, that is not how we are meant to be behaving. But I think those moments actually give the show a little bit more weight to it than we get in the film. But I do have to say that even if the show is a little wonky in its debut, the film does go much better, as I said. And part of that is because we do have Lindsay and Krauss and Richard Rodgers. And they've been together since the very beginning of this process. They know where this trouble spots are, and they're able to smooth it out without Hammerstein. Do I think that the version that we have now is the version we would have had if Hammerstein was alive? No.
That's a very interesting point.
Yeah, the nostalgia, like, they went with the nostalgia, and that's where it is. So Lindsay and Krauss are actually have a bigger reputation as script doctors, but they're signed on to do this because they actually win the Pulitzer Prize for a play called State of the Union. I think that's 1945. Okay. So again, this is a play that causes quite a bit of ruckus. Not because it's a really, really good play, but it speaks to that historical moment, in that particular time period. They did do a lot of writing for Cole Porter. They re-doctor Anything Goes, and if you know anything about Anything Goes, it needed it several times, like several bits of revision in there. But they end up doing a lot more work as script doctors than anything. And so they come in and actually have, it looks like, more control over the story when we get to the film. And so we kind of see more of Lindsay and Krause in the film than we do on stage. I feel the stage version feels more like Ock.
Interesting.
Especially
That's a
in
really
kind
good
of
point.
Like changing it up. Having to change the perhaps I had a wicked childhood, right?
Yes.
There's something good where they fall in love in the what is that thing called? The gazebo or whatever.
Yes.
That the original song there was we'll just be an ordinary couple. That's all we'll ever be. Right, with our children by our side, loving hand in hand, doing the right thing over and over again, but without the contrast of No Way to Stop It. That song just would feel like, well, this is boring.
Yeah, right.
And whereas the new song is about passion, isn't it?
Yes,
right?
Absolutely it is.
And so there is quite a bit of change between. And I think people, when they go to see the show, the stage show, they're a little shocked.
It's drastically different if you don't know. Yeah.
And if you don't, you can opt to buy like when you pay for the rights, you can opt to buy I Have Confidence because it's not in there. You can also opt to, buy the Something Good as well.
I didn't know that.
And you can do it more as the stage show, or you can do it more as the film show. And they're kind of two different packages, and there's two different scripts that kind of go along with it. So it's really very, very interesting how kind of we put all of this together. I don't know. I'm just always kind of baffled, but anyway.
Well, why don't you tell us what you can tell us about the addition of, just before we cut out of here, about the addition of Edelweiss. What can you tell us? Because that's a pretty important story in the life of Oscar Hammerstein.
Obviously so much. I mean, there's so much that you can say about this. There's so much you can say about his lyric writing, and we'll stick to Edelweiss, but I just want to give you a couple things. When you watch how Hammerstein goes about lyric writing, you start realizing very quickly that he doesn't give up when something works. For example, my favorite things started out as the things that I like. Riding along on my big brother's bike. These are a few of the things that I like. And then it becomes, the song that we know and love. But reading his lyric sheets on that are hilarious, the stuff that he comes up with. And you can kind of sing most of them. But he does the same thing for a deer. My favorite thing is kind of watching him get stuck by fa. And being like, fa doesn't even mean anything. I can't even do anything with this. And him just being like, question mark? I don't know. Like... And it, like coming back and being like far, like, I don't know what we're doing here. And I always just find that funny.
Yes.
But Edelweiss is a particular moment, right, in that particular show. And there's a lot of apocryphal stories that go along with Edelweiss, and I'm here to dispel most of them. I have heard myself in lectures past talking about how they watched it the night before and knew they needed something at that moment, and he just penned it perfectly. And that is not what happened. It also was not, it was penned kind of last and during some of the out-of-town tryouts, but it wasn't I don't think it was during Boston. I think it was during New Haven. And Oscar Hammerstein wasn't in New Haven. He was in the hospital with the beginnings of the stomach cancer. And so he was not there. So he was so sick, they didn't know what was going to happen. And so Rogers and Lindsay and Krause were able to identify the moment that they had missed. And they were able to telegram him and say, here's the moment we've missed. Here's the moment that we need to get to kind of complete the captain's character arc and give us the the reason to basically like stump for these people as they go across the Alps. Like we needed to be, we need to be in their corner. And he says, we need to see that he is not just, a military man, that there's something at his heart. And so this gets introduced in the first act, and then it comes back where we know it in the second act as well at the festival performance. But this is kind of what's great about this story is that this is it's obviously something everybody believes that they need, but they don't have Ak to see that that's what he needs as well. And he just has to trust them. And you have to give Ak a lot of credit, because this ends up being probably one of his most iconic songs. And he's not seen the show. He has no idea what's going on other than the reports that he's getting back from telegrams at this point. So it's Richard Rodgers who titles the song. I want it to be called Edelweiss. It needs to be about the this national flower, basically, of Austria, and I've written the tune for you. And that is not the way they worked.
Right.
Ever. If you know anything about Rodgers and Hammerstein, they flip the script on everybody, and they say, hey, we need this to serve the story, and it should serve the story first and foremost. And it's always the lyrics first, and then the music brings it into, because it has to be about the story. And they didn't have time. They didn't have time for that. And Ak was so sick that they didn't want to put him through that. So Ak had to do what he, did in his early life and set a lyric to something that was already there. So,
and what's so interesting is I remember reading, I think it's in Mary Rodgers' memoir. I think she's the one who wrote about it. I might be wrong, but I think she is. Where she wrote about how Oscar would just labor over lyrics. It took him so long to get a lyric right. And then he'd send it to Rodgers, and Rodgers could set it like that. And it would drive Hammerstein crazy. Well, but this is here we see the flip of that even, which is kind of beautiful at the end of their partnership, for it to be one that Rodgers has written the melody for, and then Hammerstein just overnight, or however long it takes, writes this iconic anthem.
Yeah. So he gets kind of this assignment. It looks like it's about October 15th. So that's kind of consistent with the New Haven kind of look. So this is months before the show actually opens. And they figured that out. And so there's something in his on his legal pad, and it doesn't look like his handwriting. I suspect it is either his daughter's or his wife's, where it's like Edelweiss. Okay, what is Edelweiss? And it talks about, it gives him the scientific name of it, and it's like a native of the Alps in Central Europe, a small herb, 6 inches high, marine white, woolly leaves, like this is what it is.
Brainstorming.
Can you tell? It's like, I got to give him something. You need to write a song about Edelweiss. What the heck is Edelweiss?
Right, and we don't have that here. So
it's not something that, this isn't even an invention of his brain.
Yeah.
He's got this look, and then you start seeing kind of other things be written down. But I like kind of where some of his lyrics are going, because in this particular case, you can kind of always sing it with the original tune. So you've got, so one of the earliest drafts, we get Edelweiss, Edelweiss, tell me what you are strong for. And if you think about that in context of where the captain is at that moment, you kind of go, okay, what is my country being strong for in this moment that looks like it's about to be crushed? It is going to be crushed. Why are you so resilient? That kind of a thing. So you get some of that in there. We also get, as I'm scrolling through photographs here, Edelweiss, Edelweiss, I won't leave you behind me, though I'll be far at sea. In my dreams, you will find me. over and over and over again. This idea, like, he knows what needs to happen here. It needs to be that nostalgia song, right? And so he's starting to kind of put some of this together. Edelweiss, Edelweiss, when I leave you behind me, there I'll be far at sea. In my dreams you will find me. Or... oh my. When you're, I see his handwriting is going downhill. This is another part of it. I was really, really good at it for a while, and I'm like, oh, I'm now struggling. When I'm dreaming, you will find me. So he's like trying out different endings. And it's funny because I feel like a lot of the lyrics are far more explicit about what they're trying to do with the nostalgia of it. And then, this is 4 or 5 days later. Edelweiss, Edelweiss, stay the way that I found you, small and bright, sprigs of white. Out there, I can't read it anymore. It's hard.
You know what?
You start realizing what he's doing, and it's like, okay, he started realizing over 4 or 5 days. It's like, I don't need to be explicit about the fact that I'm missing my homeland. I need to find words that will tell us that that they can act through.
What's interesting is that as you're reading all of those potential lyrics for that song, I keep thinking he ended up going with what was simplest, right? Small and white, clean and bright. You know what I mean? It's just so simple, and then yet that it's last perfect.
And that last iconic line, he realizes he doesn't have to start with that. He can end with it, right?
Yeah.
And so he goes with
forever.
Best, but we don't get that until 4 or 5 days in. And so, like, I think it's 2000. It looks like 9/20 or 21. Yeah, the 20th of October.
Okay.
He's really funny. So he writes in his little scrawl, like, just scrawl across it that you have to kind of interpret. But when he feels like he has something that could be sent to music, all of a sudden you get like block letters. And it's like, oh, okay, this is the one that people need to read. Yeah. And this isn't final, which is really funny. But this is like the first draft of something that actually works and seems like what it's going to be. Edelweiss, Edelweiss, I'll come back and I'll find you. Small and white, clean and bright, on the mountain behind you. Flower of Austria, bloom and grow forever. Edelweiss, Edelweiss, bless my homeland forever. And then he starts tweaking it, and we take out more references to Austria. We take out more things. And what he does is brilliant, y'all, because if it was Flower of Austria, why in the world would we be singing it as Americans
anywhere
today?
Else?
We sing it as bless my... I mean, this is a United States song more than anything else, you know? And people sing it that way because they recognize that. And his forethought on that is pretty brilliant.
Yeah.
But, you watch him keep going. He doesn't really land on the final for a couple weeks until we get there.
So this idea of it some time.
Yeah, it does take him some time to kind of really unpack it, and it's just usually a word here or there, a word here or there. I mean, he's got the basics of a lot of the music that we know and love, in the first few days, and then it's just the painstaking. Do I need that? Is that too on the nose? How do I, hammer it out? Like, is it that I'm just reminiscing about how beautiful this place is, and then I can just say, bless my homeland, and that's all I need.
That's enough.
And that's enough, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
But I mean, he's so purposeful about what he's doing and why he's doing it. And I think that The Sound of Music, it has two different lives. It's got the stage show life. This got more of Bach in it. And then it's got this movie life that is far more Lindsay Krause and Rogers. And both are beloved. But without Hammerstein, you do lose you don't lose the nostalgia for like America's, participation in World War II and things like that, but you lose some of that critical commentary on people who sit on the sidelines. Yeah. And that was Ock.
Yeah.
And so you have to kind of remember that. So as this show is on tour, it's something to think through, like, is this particular show more like the movie, or is it more like the original stage show? Do you get some of that indictment of the audience in some ways? Are you sitting there going, oh dear, wow, my humanity is showing when you watch it, when you watch the show? Would I be the one that just sits there and tries to survive rather than saying, no, this is wrong, knowing that wasn't going to bring me, that a principled stand at that moment was not going to get me any points. It was actually going to not do great things for my life. But the fact that more people sit and just try to outlast it really means that seems to be his kind of overarching theme since the 30s, is that, individual people cannot just protect their own rear ends. They need to be principled and stand by their principles.
Yeah.
Even when it makes, it doesn't make sense to do so. So it's really interesting.
I love that point. I did not know the juxtaposition of Hammerstein. I had never thought about the impact that Hammerstein's death would have had on the development of the film. It never had occurred to me. So I think that's really, really interesting and a great point. And you're absolutely right. And when you talk about, the indictment of the audience, I have to think about Cabaret, which comes not too far down the road and deals a lot with the same themes, though in a very, very different way. But
and this isn't.
It's interesting.
Sound of Music isn't the indictment that Cabaret is.
No,
Cabaret indicts the audience. And if you miss that, then you've missed the whole point of the show.
Right.
But, Hammerstein has always been subtle. He's not
heavy-handed.
Rarely on the nose with things. And when he is, it's because it's incredibly effective. Yeah. But, he's somebody who realizes that you can say things and make people think about them and, remind yourself. I think that, in the last 10, 15 years, anytime there's a crisis that's been happening, in our country and around the world, my brain has just always goes back to, there's no way to stop it. There's no way to stop it. When I'm like, I've got all of these things to do. I can't get in.
That's right.
I hear Ock in the back of my head. And
that is so interesting because I do the same thing. I'd never thought of that song in that context, but you do think, let me just take care of my own little world. Let me take care of what's within my four walls.
Yeah.
Right?
I find myself saying, I have babies to take care of.
Right.
I can't
exactly
afford to do something crazy.
Exactly. Exactly. I just don't want to show up on the news. You know what I mean? Just keep my nose to the grindstone.
We need to keep a job. Thing. We need to keep food on the table. My babies need to be safe.
Exactly.
I'm like,
exactly.
This will not do any of those things. This would be bad.
I'm with you 1,000%.
But
I had never thought. Yeah, I had never made that connection.
We all do that. That's just the history of humanity.
Yeah.
And that's why what happens. And then we're shocked by it.
That's right. Yes, exactly. Wow.
History.
Man, that's very
moves
insightful.
In circles.
Very insightful. And on that note, I think we should call it a day. That'll do it for this episode of the Dr. Broadway podcast. Tune in next time when we'll be talking about Suffs, which open on Broadway in 2024. Until then, connect with us via email at hello@drbroadway.com. We're on Instagram, YouTube, or TikTok at Dr. Bway Podcast.